Feminism is brainwashing this generation.
Millennials are lazy.
Millennials are special snowflakes.
You're not doing anything, you're just posting online.
There's a world outside your phone.
The world isn't a safe space.
Did your liberal arts degree teach you that?
Stop marching and get a job. Like, really?
I think there's an assumption that young people are not active, that they're not involved in social action, they don't care about their communities, they stare at their phone. And staring at the phone might be right, but I don't think that's true. And over the years, I've been teaching for a very long time. I see students more active. My name is Radhika Balakrishnan, and I'm a professor of women's gender studies at Rutgers University. When I first got to the Center for Women's Global Leadership, I knew that we did a lot of work at the Commission on the Status of Women. Our interns and other students got access to the UN. And I went to the Commission on the Status of Women, and people kept talking about how there weren't enough young people. And I just thought, here I am at Rutgers, one of the most diverse student populations, and an amazing group of students from Douglas that should be going to the commission. So the first year we did it, we just had a weekend where students came and did an intensive training. And I think it was such a success, and the weekend just wasn't enough, that the next year we did it as a 1-credit course. The title of the course is Feminist Advocacy at the United Nations. Finally, and actually encouragement from deans, is that this is actually a 3-credit bearing course, not only about visiting the UN, but learning about the institution, learning about women's activism and feminist advocacy. And I have to say that every year I teach it, I'm more convinced that it's a great course to teach.
The first half of the course was kind of spent for all of us to understand what are feminist issues overall and how does the UN function.
I am a research assistant with the Center for Women's Global Leadership, and when I said I wanted to learn more about UN advocacy, they said, why don't you audit Radhika's class? The kind of energy, the kind of possibilities that even people younger than me are thinking and considering is very inspiring.
I've called myself a feminist since I was I think 13 or 14. One of my favorite people on this planet, Emma Watson, said this during her UN speech: if not me, then who? If not now, then when? If it's not us, then how are we ever going to be able to stand up and say that this is what we want? We want everything, but then we have to work for it.
In my household, there's only girls, so we've always grown up with some controversial, stereotypical issues in the house. But as soon as I came to college, I started teaching my parents, to break away from the stereotypes. So going to this conference further developed my skills and my knowledge in order to now spread my knowledge and my personal experiences to outside of my family. Walking to the UN on this beautiful morning. So early, I got here at 8:11.
The CSW, it stands for Commission on the Status of Women, and it's the principal intergovernmental body that focuses specifically on the goal of women's empowerment worldwide. The conference that we went to, which is the 62nd, focused specifically on the goals of rural women and girls' empowerment, as well as media.
I didn't know before going into the UN that there was so much non-governmental organizations present also. NGOs, which is non-governmental organizations.
I just finished attending a panel on girls' education in Nigeria. It was hosted by the United Kingdom. This is the event. It was the Girls' Education Challenge. They talked a lot about different programs that the UK has implemented to try and help foster more education in rural areas. They also provided about 10 different perspectives on girls' education and intersecting issues.
I have a lot of passion about raising awareness for violence against women, but when women like this talk, it just gives purpose to your cause and just makes you reassured in that, okay, so I definitely want to do this because I definitely have this much passion.
Hands down, my favorite event was celebrating and increasing women's political participation. On the panel, there were a bunch of members of parliament from around the world, but my favorite one was the one from Malawi. And the room was filled with really serious diplomats, but at the end of her speech, everyone was up and cheering for her. She got a standing ovation just because of what she was saying, and I think that really inspired me because she had a tough life, but she managed to climb through the ranks.
The one event that I went to was talking about how to use social media to advocate for victims of violence, and that event actually helped my personal advocacy because I'm an advocate for victims of violence at my school, so I can actually pass on those resources. So those people helped me and helped also educate, but they helped me in my work that I do.
I remember that in one of the meetings that I went to, some high school girls went there and they made me happy that they were speaking up and asking questions, and it was more interactive with the high schoolers than with the older generation.
I was at this Nigerian NGO panel event. It was question and answer time, so I raised my hand and I was walking to the podium to ask my question. Then this older woman stood up and she went to the podium and I didn't get the chance to ask my question anymore. In that point, I felt as though my opinions did not matter or they were not as valid because she was older than me.
Having been the generation of people who always worked on these conferences, and many people say, well, where are the young people these days? Well, they're doing amazing things. They might not be in the spaces you were, but they're doing amazing things. So it was about how do we bring young people to those spaces.
Also at the Secretary General Q&A, you saw a lot of that representation. I think there was also a young person who's part of Model UN who also asked a question, like, what are you doing at the UN to listen to young people? The SG Secretary General gave a really great response and saying, I'm working, I want to be on your side too.
The big issue that came up during the conference is that we're not only thinking about the issues faced by women, but also those faced by girls. And girls by definition would be young people. Without young people contributing to the dialogue and saying what's going on, we really miss out on a perspective that's very much needed in these conversations, as well as intellectual capital, new ideas, innovative ways of solving problems that the current generation hasn't thought of.
Although I am kind of younger and consider myself part of the younger generation, it's also interesting to see how another younger generation is tackling and grappling with these issues.
I think our generation is able to do this, and together we have the technology, the means, and the resources to really join hands.
As Audre Lorde said, the master's tools cannot be used to dismantle the master's house. So the tools of patriarchy cannot be used to fight patriarchy. So when we're trying to advocate for feminist advocacy, we have to bring young boys and young men into the conversation, because without including them in the conversation, then we cannot totally achieve gender equality.
Youth and young people are the future leaders, journalists, researchers, activists. A phrase that I heard a lot was nothing about us without us. And I think when youth are the subject and the subject is the future, there's no way you can have that conversation without young people.
I would say that the most important way for young people to get involved with politics is if they're able to register to vote as soon as possible.
We're the ones that are going to have to go to vote, and if we are aware of all the issues, then we're going to vote for the right reasons.
Before college, I was not politically involved. I did not, really care for politics. And then I realized that it's really important to learn about what's going on around me, to learn about what's happening to the people around me.
If you can't vote, organize. If you can vote, organize.
That's a form of participation, that's a form of activism, just being at a protest.
Getting young people to go out and do that kind of grassroots work at the local level, talk to your neighbors, go into places, explain issues. I think that's what's going to create long-term social change.
Some people have certain skill sets in one area. Maybe they're not the ones organizing the protests, but they're the ones, filming the protest. So I think there are other places for everyone. Just sitting in the classroom and hearing you guys speak and seeing your kind of critique of the system, but also willingness to confront it, gives me so much hope that you guys are going to go out and wherever your places are in the world, you'll be able to, spark that change.
The goal is help as many people as possible and try and make a difference, however big or small.
In the future, I hope to become a VP, vice president, or CEO of a public corporation.
I want to go into the field of diplomacy, so maybe become an ambassador of either Ecuador or the US.
I plan to do corporate social responsibility. I knew that corporate social responsibility would help me get down, get my hands deep in the work that I wanted to do with issues that really affect women.
The plan is to take a year off after graduation to work in international women's rights. My first choice of the country I would like to go to is Kenya. When we're at the UN, I was looking at the wall where all of the Secretary General's pictures were. I'm like, well, it's time for a woman Secretary General. Maybe I would be that woman.
My long-term goal is to be a college professor. So I just know that education is something that's really important to me, and I love teaching and working with students.
I just figured out recently that I want to go to law school. I want to do a lot of work in advocacy in the future, and I feel like the law is a good vessel to do that because there's a lot of different applications where the law is necessary, and to change the law you have to first understand it. So I am excited to participate in that way.
I hope all records is like this. If people come out of colleges, people come out of universities with this willingness to really participate in social change, in social struggles, that's where so much of the power lies.
Most movements have been led by young people. We saw the movements on gun control. Those were high school students. Throughout history, it's young people who've really changed the world. So as a teacher, the idea is what resources can you make available that helps people change the world.